Hi, this is Stephanie Patton. I'm the prevention coordinator for the town of Stoughton, and we are going to be talking today about the next in our short series of videos about the data from the 2026 Youth Health Survey. So today, briefly, we're going to talk about some of the findings related to bullying and fighting. Sensitive topic, as are a lot of the topics in our survey data. Here is a little bit about what we're learning. And what you're seeing here actually are some trend data from 2019 to 2026. So on my left is the data from the middle school. And so here we asked students about their experiences with bullying, and this is self-reported. So bullying on school property and then electronic bullying. The challenge with bullying, of course, is that bullying has a very specific legal definition. And although we define bullying in the youth health surveys at the outset of the questions that we ask students, sometimes bullying is used sort of more generally in student terms. Even as parents, we often refer to things as bullying when they might be behaviors that are unacceptable or mean, but might not fit the legal definition. So I think just to be clear, we are not seeing 35% of our students meeting the legal criteria for bullying. However, it is really important to think about the student experience when it comes to sort of how they are experiencing um, uh, behaviors from their peers. And so this is a good snapshot of that. Statistically, it doesn't really appear that this data has changed at the middle school very much from 2024 to 2026. We do see a decline in electronic bullying. And so those are behaviors that happen in digital spaces, including texting, social media. May not be necessarily occurring in school. In fact, probably are not. At the high school, we see lower rates of both of these kinds of behaviors. There is a developmental piece to this. Also, students really start to understand the nuances of the differences between bullying and some of those social behaviors that aren't so kind in the adolescent years. And so here again, we don't see significant changes from 24 to 26, but definitely some concern here, things that we should be aware of. The good news is that most students are reporting that they have not experienced bullying. We do ask in the surveys actually if students themselves report bullying other students. Those numbers, of course, are lower than what you see here in terms of students reporting being on the receiving end. But there are students who do report that they engage in those behaviors. And although that's not a great finding, it is something that is suggestive that students are being honest on the survey itself. Those are hard behaviors to self-report. We also look at fighting. And so here you see the data from Stoughton High and also the middle school. Again, some trends from 2019 to 2026. The metric around being in a physical fight could be a physical fight that happened anywhere. So that those numbers are going to include fights that happen off school property. They may be at home, they may be in other spaces. So of course, those numbers would be higher than the numbers around in a physical fight on school property. Those numbers are definitely declining at the high school significantly. At the middle school, we've seen a little bit of an increase from 2019. We definitely were seeing an increase in these behaviors post-COVID for sure. Students were struggling with how to interact with their peers as they return to school. And then there is being threatened with an or injured with a weapon. Again, that is not caveated to school property. How students define weapon is also somewhat self-determined. But again, mostly good news here and some things to be concerned about. We do know in general, when we sort of cross-check this with what is being reported out of other school data, that fighting really is down. Our administrators are reporting that. That is consistent with what we're seeing here. We know that those school reports and those out of school suspensions are down as well. So those are good indicators. Sometimes when we look at the middle school data, and so I know folks are sort of seeing that jump from 2019 to the 2024, 2026 data. The concept of being in a physical fight, sometimes the what does it mean to be in a fight might be a little bit different for middle school students. Middle school is a developmental period where students really perceive themselves to be the main character, right? The center of attention. And so when they think about in a physical fight, that might also include being on the periphery, being connected. It doesn't necessarily mean they were actually involved in the altercation, the physical altercation itself. And given that the in-school property, those should correlate with what our staff are recording. We're certainly recording way lower numbers than that. And so I think some of this has to do with how students self-report and also what they consider maybe to be a physical fight. There are probably low-level things that simply don't get reported. So that's the quick summary of bullying and fighting. I will see you in the next video when we're going to talk about mental health.